Hi everybody and welcome to another Touchpoint Group Banking App Insight session. We're looking at July 2023 for the US market, and in this session we're going to look at a couple of different things. Firstly, how you should be tracking the small incremental changes that can help you arrest the decline in customer satisfaction before it gets too much of a negative impact. And then we're going to do a little bit more of a features look at the check deposit feature and some of the best practice that's out there versus some of the not so best practice and what you can do to close the gap in those areas. Tony Patrick, as ever, will be leading the charge on this, and I'll pass it over to you, Tony, to walk us through it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, so today looking at the US banks, and you can see here there's a few of those in this particular view. Just by the way, if your bank isn't here, we don't change this too often, this particular view, but if your bank isn't here, just reach out to us and we can do a personalized session to go through yours. But today we're looking at Capital One, actually, and I'll show you why. So let's just jump in and have a look at a bit of detail. So just looking at tier one banks at the moment. So one of the things we can see is US Bank is actually doing pretty well at the top. There's, for them, they're actually like a couple of months of decline, but it's very subtle at this point. And one of the things we can also see is Truist's growth is continuing, although they had a couple of dips across the year. One of the things that is interesting here is that Capital One, although it looks, it's a subtle movement down across time, and some measures you might not be able to see this, but the way we work with this data, of course, is we're looking at what we call the engaged customer score. So those customers giving both a rating and also a comment on the App Store or Android store. So what we get then is movements that are happening here. We know exactly why they're happening, why something's gone up, why something's gone down. And there are two parts to this. One is we can see at the end of this period for Capital One, there's been a dip. So that's the dip. It's the lowest they've been this year. But of course, you can see the trend across the year is also declining from around 4.4 and sitting around just above 4 in this most recent month. So let's move and have a quick look. Before we jump into and have a look at that in the detail, let's have a look at what's happening with the rest of the market. So USAA is still down here, but they are improving slightly. But it's good. It's not fast enough from our perspective. They did have the major dip in October, and they need to pick that up. Otherwise, it's going to be a full year before things recover. Another interesting thing is a question we get is, for example, we have the likes of, say, Citibank and others sitting at the top, and even Bank of America. They're floating around 4.2 to 4.5. They're not going to move down ever, are they? Well, yes, they are. Now, here's an example of something that's happened recently. Discover Financial was one of our top-level banks that's been sitting there for a long time at sort of up, nearly bumping up against 4.5. But in February, they dropped away, and they have not recovered since. There's been July's their first slight turnaround. But again, if you're not watching what's going on here, you could actually drop away like that. And the likes of, even the likes of Citibank and Bank of America can also be susceptible to that. So just good to watch out for those things. So let me just move forward into having a look at some other banks here. So one of interest for a while has been Fifth Third. They are picking some things back up, but of course they need to improve a bit further from where they are, which is, but they are picking things up, you can see, from April, which is great. TD is struggling from the drop they had in October. So again, we're going to watch that next month as well to see where that moves to. So what I will do, I will have a look at, just looking here, this is just an exaggerated, just a view of Capital One on its own. And we can see it was bumping up sort of around 4.4, and now it's sitting around just below 4.1. So we need to actually see, well, what's happened recently, but also what's happened across time here. So first of all, I'll have a look at what's happened recently. So first of all, I've just gone in here and looked at this week by week, so from the start of May until the end of July. And what we can see here is the drop that happened in July has basically come from the middle of July. It's dropped away from that point. So something's happened in the middle of July, and it's moved down a level. So what we can do then is just have a look at what's happened in here. I'll just start out at reliability and stability, for example. But what I can see at the top here, this is the actual score we saw before. So that movement from 4.2 to 4.1 for Capital One. And what I can see at the bottom here, because these are pain points, these are all pain points, we want these scores to go down. We want these frequencies to go down as far as we can. And I can see like reliability and stability has gone up by 0.4, so it's fairly flat in the scheme of things. Others have actually improved, so design UA has gone down, which is great, and authentication has gone down. But the one thing that's gone up is features and functionality. So previously it was around 3.5, and it's gone up 1.3 points. So again, this is what we're talking about is subtle movement. But I can actually see what's going on in here. I can see among features and functionality. So in general, there's a pickup in poor moving money feature, which is just fairly broad. But if I go down below that, here was something that was basically non-existent previously, but now is popping up. A basic thing like checking your account balance. So what I can see here is people can't see their current balance after a payment, and there's no running balance, and it's becoming an issue for customers here. And even this person here has said it won't show me about my balances even when configured to do so. So clearly an emerging issue for customers, so they need to keep an eye out for that, definitely. The next thing is looking at why that long-term trend has happened. So looking at these pain point areas again, what I can see is reliability and stability here has been going up, up, and up. So that's the major driver of what's going on here. Although we can see features and functionality, that little dip at the end we saw, and we know why that's happened because of that the issue with people being able to see their current balance in there as well. Let's have a quick closer look at reliability and stability. So what's underneath that? What's actually driving that number going up? If I include broad technical issues, this is often when people talk about they've had problems, but they aren't specific what they are, we can see that's increasing. So that's interesting. If I take that away, what we can see broadly here is app bugs, crashes, and freezes. That's going up in frequency. We want to squash that down as far as we can. And slow app is also increasing across there as well. So clearly, this is something that's fairly subtle in the movement that's going on across the whole year. But Capital One need to watch out for this because it's really important that they attack this before it becomes a major issue. So that is Capital One. What I'd like to have a look at now, just switching across to something different here, I'd like to have a look at, not particularly for Capital One, but across a few different brands here, is how they're performing on various journeys or particular features in the app here. Now, the one I want to focus on today is, now also it's a bit of a mind switch as well, because we're looking here at the score. So when someone talks about one of these features, what's the associated score with that? Are they happy or unhappy in that conversation? And what I can see here for check deposit, now check deposit is one of those things which you can actually, you can do well, but also it's a struggle for a lot of brands to get right, because we're turning something that's like a check from the physical world into the digital world, and it becomes a problem to do that. So first of all, I want to have a look at US Bank, which is scoring really well. This is looking at just this year, just seeing how they've done so far. Let's just select them and see what they're actually up to. So the first thing to look at is the comments. Now, in general, this is a score from 1 to 5, and in general, we can see this is green. There's a green tinge across the whole lot of it. Only a couple of things, a couple of problems here where it doesn't want to scan checks. But in general, you can see things is people loving depositing checks are quick and easy. I love it. It's a great experience for customers, you can see. Also, I'll do a quick look at this view here, which is looking at basically, what's the story coming out of this data in terms of broadly, what's the broad view of what's going on, like a helicopter view. And you can see here, the comments coming through in this area here are looking at things like good check deposit feature. It's a great feature. I can deposit cash. I can take a photo of the check. A couple of little red areas. So some areas still for improvement, but still you get the idea that this is a very positive experience for customers. Let's switch across to somewhere else. This one is looking at USAA, and let's jump into that. Just see what the comparative view looks like. So the story we have now is basically, you can see very red, so it's dragging the score backwards. So poor app check deposit feature, poor app check feature. For example, there's things going on like transaction processing problems, for example. So lots of issues happening in there for those customers. But what I would like to do is also look at examples of these comments. So remember when we're looking at US Bank, we saw a whole lot of green sitting in there as well. So what I can see now, though, is basically we've got a lot of red. So that's our problem here, is there's issues with check deposit, there's errors, it's impossible because the app is unable to see my device location. So errors across the board. And again, this just shows what a good experience is like and what a bad experience is like. So that's all interesting. So there's obviously some good and bad experiences coming from different app types. Let's have a look, though. What is the impact on all this? What we're looking at here is just showing us how does it impact my score. So if I have a good experience, which we saw from US Bank, I'm actually contributing in a positive way to my score. Now, just by the way, this is just for one particular feature in your app, how it's impacting your score. So apply this across all of your features, and you can see it can actually have a really bad experience if you don't do it well across all your features. I can see here that US Bank is actually getting a higher score because of this by 0.06. Whereas the likes of USAA, their score is being dragged down by nearly 0.1 out of 5 just because of this feature. So again, that just shows us the impact of these features across the board and being able to pick up that detail so you can improve every single feature to get to that higher level and scoring and what customers expect these days from a banking app. So thank you, Glenn.
Great points there, Tony. And I think another mindset that you can use when looking at these is it's not just the score, is that score is a reflection of personal experience. And so when you look at that graphic there where you see it's having such a massive impact dragging it down, it is having a negative impact on the user experience of the app. Mm-hmm. And in today's climate where credit ratings are up and there's risk around there and people's confidence is being tested when it comes to the whole banking sector, all of these little things add up massively in regards to building that trust. So if you want to improve the trust, improve the experience, and have a bigger impact on the experience of your customers, you're more than welcome. Reach out, have a chat with us, and we can have a deeper dive into your banking app and go from there. Thanks again, Tony.